Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 63, recording on Monday, March 3rd. Got back from Indy over the weekend, a week at the Combine, a ton of conversations, and I'm going to get to some of what I learned in Indy at the top. Later on in the show, we're going to have a guest. His name is Pete Bercich. He was in Indy as well. Some really good conversation regarding what the team could do in free agency, should do, the positions that he feels were priorities. And some of that to me was kind of surprising. So I was appreciative of Pete's perspective because it was really good. As always, this show is presented by First Resource Bank. That is a member FDIC bank in the local Minneapolis area. They got branches all over the place. They're Vikings fans who run that thing. They are very in tune to what's going on and curious about what the Vikings might do over the next week. So if you want a bank that cares about the same thing that you are here caring about as well, please go check out First Resource Bank. At the top, like I said, I'm going to give you some of the nuggets that I also had in my story at The Athletic. That is where I unloaded the clip in terms of everything that I got last week, some plans, priorities, players to keep an eye on in terms of the activity. I hit on Darnold, I hit on Byron Murphy, I hit on Harrison Smith, I hit on Cam Bynum, I hit on potential defensive tackles, I hit on interior defensive line, I had some information from scouts, and if you want all that stuff, please go check it out at The Athletic. But I'll give you some of kind of the Spark Notes version of what I had. I'll start with Sam Darnold. To me, the question which remains is just what does the market look like? And that question, the two subsidiary aspects are which teams are realistically interested and how far are they willing to go from a monetary perspective. The Spark Notes from the Vikings perspective is unless his value is like $25 million in average annual value or below, it's hard to really see a path because they know they have a ton of needs everywhere else and they don't have the draft capital to fill all those needs. So they're going to need the cap space. So it becomes very difficult to build a roster and paying a guy at that level who's not like the superhero type quarterback. So that's the Sam Darnold note. The Byron Murphy Jr., the Vikings met with his representatives at Clutch Sports last Wednesday. There wasn't like a strict like money exchange of what the conversation would be. It was kind of a feeler. And I know this, the Vikings really want Byron Murphy Jr. back. He wants to be back in Minnesota, but the question is, again, as per usual with this stuff, it comes down to the money and what Byron Murphy's agent at Clutch Sports as well would be. Well, I think I don't know if I said Clutch for Byron Murphy with Sam Darnold at CAA. I hope I didn't mix that up. But Byron Murphy Jr. is represented by Clutch Sports. His agent, Zeke Sandu, last year represented Daniil Hunter and wanted to take him to the market because if you bring a guy into the open market, they're probably going to make the most money. So the tension really is like what is Byron Murphy and his representative willing to take because Byron wants to be in Minnesota versus how much do they value just the money aspect of it for a guy who, this is probably going to be the best contract that he signed. So that's the situation with him. At safety, Harrison Smith, I wouldn't be surprised if he's back. If he is back, it's probably hard to see how Cam Bynum fits in at the price tag that his representatives at Clutch Sports, which is Demarius Bilbo, what they're interested in. So I'm watching that. If Harrison ends up retiring, then I do think that makes it more likely where Cam Bynum is in play. But there's optimism with Theo Jackson, given what he's done in practice and in training camp and OTAs and during the summer of the last couple of years. So that could also make sense. I do expect additions, at least one in free agency at guard. I expect an addition in free agency at the interior defensive tackle, at least one. I'm watching other spots, cornerback 2, potentially punt returner, maybe even punter. We'll see kind of what goes on there. And then again, there's more nuggets that I have in my story at The Athletic. So go check that out because it was pretty all encompassing from conversations I had in Indy. I asked on Twitter for a couple questions. I'm not going to spend as much time as I usually do with them because I have Pete Bercich for today's pod. We're going to do a couple more this week. So I usually do 2 podcasts a week. Because it's such a big week, I'm actually going to do 3. Have a fun Vikings-related guest for you Wednesday. And then Friday or Thursday or Friday, hopefully have one of my close colleagues at The Athletic that I'm looking forward to speaking. But to get to some of the questions pretty quickly, and I did not script this, so it's just all off the cuff. Skull Warrior asked, should we expect any cap-saving moves before the tampering date? The tampering date, which is the free agency beginning date, is Monday of next week, so March 10th. The one obvious cap move that makes sense to me would be potentially cutting Ed Ingram. I don't know if that will happen before then because, I mean, they have enough cap space to do a lot of what they want to do. But that would be one. I also think some restructure type stuff could take place for some of the guys who have been on the team, whether it's a Brian O'Neill or an Andrew Van Ginkel or TJ Hawkinson, something of that sort. Let's see. Mark Josephson asked, could they sign a guard in free agency and still draft one? Absolutely. I think that is a possibility. I wrote last week about how the interior of the defensive line at the top of the draft, I mean, that is typically where you find elite guys. But I would also say, I mean, the more I have discussions, like I think the way they're thinking about the interior defensive line position is not like the big nose tackle type of guys. It's more of the slender pass rushers, get upfield type of guys. So that's what I'd say. And if those players don't exist at number 24, I do think that's where things could be, come into play as far as drafting a guard, potentially trading back and doing some creative things like that. So we'll just have to see. It's early. More draft. I'd say I'll have more draft related intel after free agency, and you kind of have a better feel of things. Purple suede shoes. Why are barely any Vikings people talking about Dylan Sampson? I think he said Skull from England. First, appreciate you listening from England. That's freaking awesome. Very cool of you to spend the time, and I loved your spot when I visited for the London game last year. I think it's a great question. Dylan Sampson is a running back from Tennessee, supposed to be a very good dude, and you watch him on tape. He's got good instincts, good footwork. He was really the bell cow of that offense. Like, I think if you're a fan of college football, you know that people think of that Tennessee offense as very Art Briles-ish, vertical shots downfield, but they really lean heavily on the run game and numbers in the run game. So I would say Dylan Sampson is one of those running back options in the mid rounds that would make a lot of sense for the Vikings. Let's see what else I've got. K. Delisle, do you think the chances have shifted with JJ to become the starter at all after this week? I don't know if they've shifted. Like, if you've read stories that we've written at The Athletic, I think the chances that JJ became the starter for 2025 are always pretty possible. Now, will I go out on a limb right now and say he's definite the starter week 1? No, because I haven't seen him on the field with my own 2 eyes since the fall. But I do know, talking to people close to him, like this guy and JJ McCarthy right now is very laser focused and very driven to prove what he was starting to prove last fall. I can say that succinctly, and I just hope people know that. Let's see here. Chris, his Twitter handle is picked by Ginkle. That's pretty good. Let's say Byron Murphy Jr. walks. We need 2 cornerbacks then. Who's the non-DJ Reed Asante Samuel that we could sign to play the CB2 role? Same with safeties if Harry and Bynum walk. He says if both Harry and Bynum walk. First, I don't expect that to happen. And then as far as CB2, what I would say is I could give you specific names. I don't really feel comfortable doing that to protect, the sourcing type stuff. But I'd say think about the CB2 beyond just the free agent market in terms of guys who could get cut over the next few days that could become who could become possibilities. So we'll see in that regard. Well, I'll do one more. Let's see. The Vikings need this is from Dave S. at the Purple Quilt. The Vikings need 2 safeties anyway, whether Harrison comes back or not, if Metellus stays at the rover position. I think people are missing the point and why Cam is so valuable. The defense has to function in that way. Whether Smith is here one more year or not, you need 2. Yeah, you definitely need another deep half safety. Again, I want to make it very clear. The Vikings love Cam Bynum, and Cam loves the Vikings. It's just a question of monetary, how you want to use your resources, and what a player wants and how that may fit. Like the Vikings might be very willing to pay Cam Bynum. I mean, I'll just call it like it is, $13 million a year. But if Cam Bynum wants 15, which puts him in the market of the Buda Bakers, the Xavier McKinneys, the Jesse Bates, I mean, then the Vikings might say, you know what, instead of paying X more million here, let's reallocate the money. And then I also paired with that is optimism in Theo Jackson with what he's done. So it's not as if their hands are as tied as they are at cornerback, where Byron Murphy Jr., if you lose him, what do you really have? I mean, yes, there's optimism and belief in Mekhi Blackman and Dwight McGlothern, but I mean, Byron Murphy Jr. has done it at a very high level and done a lot of different aspects of Brian Flores' defense, and he's still only 27 years old. So all of that is kind of what I would ask you guys to think about as you're analyzing the machinations of how this thing goes. All right, let's get to Pete Bercich. Some really good conversation that flows right from this. I mean, Pete was great. Pete was in Indy, so we had some conversations there, and I know he has friends across the league. So hope you guys enjoy this, and thank you guys for listening to the Alec Lewis Show. Pete, welcome back to the show. How was your trip to Indy?
It was great. Got a chance to meet up with a bunch of coaches and guys you don't normally talk to, and I think the other key, as you'll know, is you run into these guys. It's the one time a year where they don't have a ton on their mind, right? It's kind of, you made it through the end of the season. You're still there. You went, a lot of them were down at the Senior Bowl, so they're kind of in the mode. But yeah, they're just, sitting down with guys like Stefanski, Leslie Frazier. They're just more apt to be relaxed and talk and just be a little bit more human instead of the obvious pressure. I mean, you understand when you talk to them during the season, it's not like they talk to you and then they're done for the day, right? It's just like the beginning of, and they got a million things that have to get. So the pace it's just a different feel, and it's I like it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like even like seeing Josh McCown in the lobby of the hotel. Like, I mean, he's literally throughout the season with Sam. It was just head down, work until, I mean, I don't know how late they worked every day, but it was
Right.
it was relentless, and you could just, I mean, it was great for me because he and I were able to debrief a little bit on some of those like late season games, and his perspective, I feel like, on some of that play was phenomenal. How many combines have you been to?
Participated in one in '94, and then I think this is only the second time I've gone since. I kind of stayed away from the combine. Mainly because I just didn't have time. I had too many things, too many other jobs and things to do. And so, now I'm able to have that time to get there and spend a good 3 days, 4 days down there. It makes sense for me to go again now. Right. And then how much it's changed, obviously.
That was the next question, is describe the 1990.
Yeah, I mean, what's amazing is those, number one, I think they were there for 4 nights or 5 nights. The athletes are now, and then back in our day, you showed up middle of let's say Friday. Friday night, you were doing physical testing, and if you had any injuries, you had all your MRIs and all that other garbage. And then Saturday was physicals and all that. Saturday night was interviews with the team, and then you ran on Sunday, and then you were out the door, right? So you were there for probably 48 hours, maybe.
The craziest is hearing stories, and like no one ever writes this stuff, but you hear stories
Mm-hmm.
now of like Wednesday night, these guys haven't worked out yet, and they are in the lobby of whatever hotel, and they're like, I mean, these guys are like practicing their 40-yard dashes with the trainers. I mean, I'm serious. Like some of the at like 2 a.m. Like I've got agent friends who I hear stories about some of these nights at the combine, and I'm like, I mean, it is unbelievable. The whole thing is just it's ridiculous.
I mean, you had back in the day, you had a roommate, somebody you didn't know, and so it's like you had one bed, and then or whatever, and they could snore, or they could, you know what I mean. You may not get along with said person, and it's
you're saying that meetings, like you have a personal experience with that being the case.
No, well, I've heard about it, right? You hear about it, and back in that day, the meetings were in the lobby of the hotel where the old train station was, the old central station, and literally teams would set up in a room, and all of them would be in there, and then it was a free for all, right? You might have had, if I remember correctly, in the last few years of the combine, you had some scheduled. The top guys had some schedules, but the rest of them, you just grabbed them.
So you're just like in a room with all of them, just bouncing around between teams, kind of?
Yeah, the players would just walk around, and we'd see somebody, you're like, oh, hey, we need you. Boom, grab them, pull them in the room, find the position coach and Studwell and all those guys, and then they'd sit down and talk to them for a while, and they could literally hold a guy for an hour if they wanted to. It was you would get to know other guys. I was quality control at the time, but you get to know other guys on other teams, and you're asking them, hey, who's in your room? And it's like, well, it's so and so. Okay, we need him next. And then you would literally just camp outside the door and wait. And as soon as that kid came out the door, you grabbed him and said, hey, you're coming with me. And as you're walking, there'd be 2 or 3 other people trying to grab him away from you. You don't want to go talk to the Vikings. Come talk to the Niners. You're like, hey, get off my. It was. It got chippy, right?
It sounds.
It was just. It was the Wild West in that regard.
We're going to talk Darnold and all of the stuff, but last one. Did you run the 40?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I ran the 40. I was in the 4.8s, I think.
It's pretty impressive.
But they didn't tell us. It was okay at the time. It was average at the time. But you didn't get your results. So you would do a drill, and then you turn around and you would ask, and they wouldn't tell you.
It was like proprietary information for the people.
You got on the plane. You got on the plane to go back home, back to college or back wherever you were going. You had no idea what your numbers were, unless you had an agent or somebody that could get them. We fortunately, our weight coach got them. And you'd love it. It was a big, thick FedEx with just a 1XL sheet that was printed, right? Portrait wise. And you'd have to get your finger and, go through them and find out. Yeah. Okay. Here we are. And then it was insane.
That's
hilarious. But it was all hot. It was all hush, hush, top secret back then.
It's,
your physical would take place with like 3 team doctors. And then if you were a team, and they didn't really share much of the medical. I mean, obviously, yeah. So if you were one of the 3 doctors that got to see this person, you were lucky because you knew all the, but if they went to somebody else, you got what they gave you, and that's it. It was bizarre.
It is.
I mean, the whole thing started as a medical combine, right? Where teams are like, all right, we're going to bring everybody in, make sure when we draft them that they're healthy and they can play. And then somebody got the idea, hey, well, since we're all here, why don't we just take them out in the hallway and run a 40, right? And then now, look what that's turned into.
Now they're doing 3-cone drills, shuttle.
They're doing well, I mean, all the different ways of technology now that they have to find out how these guys sweat and what comes out. It's like it's over the top.
Yeah, it's nuts.
But whatever. Whatever.
I mean, yeah, and obviously it's now become this like pre-free agency mingling within lobbies and bars and hotels and all that stuff. I want to start you with this, and this is not Darnold related. It's not Byron Murphy Jr. related, but it is a question that I want to present to you. If you have the preference here, and you get one thing that this team can do in free agency that you think they should do or they must do in your mind, and why, Is there something that comes to mind for you?
Wow. That's tough because when you look at needs, it's hard to say. Okay, so you look at the needs, you assuming none of the free agents come back. You don't have a running back right now, really, and you don't have a corner. So you have D line guys, interior. That's kind of the bad part of the story. Is you have D line guys. Do you have you have some interior offensive linemen that you can plug and play, but you don't. You have a couple positions where you're like, if we don't get somebody, we have no one. So, corner and running back and people I think want to focus on the interior, and we do. We absolutely need to focus on the interior. Um, and, for the offense to take the next step, yeah, you need to work on that interior, that offensive line, figure that out, no question. The defense was very good this year, even with the guys that we had. Right? Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. Would that be icing on the cake? Absolutely. But Aaron Jones meant a ton to this offense this
He
year.
really did,
And it's amazing when you watch. Like if you watch this offense and you just go by length of gain per play, right? And we had a lot. We had as many explosive plays as anybody in the league. Obviously the wide receivers, but when you get to that 15 to 10-yard play, Aaron Jones is responsible for a ton of those, and that's a lot of receptions out of the backfield. So he was he was integral in the because remember our thorn on our side was short yardage and goal line.
Can't run the ball in those situations,
right? And Aaron absolutely helped in those areas. However, he was a huge part of that 10 to 15-yard offense. I mean, it's amazing the number of plays that he made in that window, right in that range. So you kind of wonder with a young quarterback, the running game is going to be even more important. Obviously offensive line then, but to have that running back and to know we don't really have anyone in that room right now. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, you do have some glaring needs, and in multiple spots. So you need a corner, you need a running back, and then you need an offensive lineman and defensive lineman. You may end up needing a safety. You don't know how that's going to turn out, right? Harrison Smith retires. Cam Bynum decides to go his own way or whatever. Who knows what's going to happen with that? You may end up needing a safety in that mix too. I don't think the safety isn't as integral, right? The Flores defense changed quite a bit year one to year two. Year one, the safeties were unbelievably important to that scheme, and with the tweaks that they had made and some of the changes, I don't think they're as integral now. But you still need somebody.
It's funny because I had a conversation with my editor about a story I did Monday, just like stuff I heard in the comment, and he's like, "You're setting up all these paths," and I'm like, "Well, I mean, the reality is the point. I mean, if you lose Aaron Jones and he's not back, then you have to have avenues to go at running back. Same if Byron Murphy
Right.
Jr. is not at corner." I mean, then the question becomes: Do you need a nickel corner as well as an outside corner? Like, he kind of does multiple spots. To segue,
Right.
I mean, we talked to Aaron Jones a little bit, but with Byron Murphy Jr., and I don't know how much you've gone back and rewatched the tape, but I just what did you feel like he provided this past year? How important? I mean, really, the question is, I mean, how good was he in terms of how far would you be willing to go to pay him? Because he's an interesting player in a cornerback market that is fairly thin with guys like DJ Reed, Charvarius Ward, but just Byron Murphy,
Yeah.
I kind of just wonder. I mean, obviously the ball production was there from an interception perspective, but what you felt like
question.
he provided for this defense.
I think that was I'm scrolling through the list to try to find some of the other DBs that we have out there.
Yeah.
I think his ability to find the football and make plays on the football were, that was huge this year. That was probably the biggest difference. The thing with him, the Byron Murphy, is when he wants to be, he's really good. He's really, really good. And if you got that level of play, and we got that consistent level of play, I think this year out of him, so it's one of those things where, if you pay him a ton of money, are we going to get the same level of intensity and production? And are you going to pay him like you would if he was a free agent this year or the year before? He's very good. Will he get that 18 million a year mark, or will he be closer to 15? I think that's kind of what's out there. I mean, DJ Reed I was very impressed with DJ
I
Reed.
really like him.
Getting a chance to watch him before we played the Jets. Obviously, he's got was a Sauce Gardner on the other side of him, who gets all the headlines and everything. But DJ Reed is a really, really good corner. So if you can come away with either, if it was an either or, I'd love to have them both. But if you can come away with either or, they're both really, really good football players. So Murphy. The familiarity they have with Murphy is really what's going to dictate, I think, how much they want to pay him.
I want to present this because I had an interesting conversation with a coach who was talking about Murphy in the sense that the coach was essentially like, in this defense, with how we play, you're asking guys to do a lot of stuff that a traditional man cover corner, A, wouldn't do, or B, might not be willing to do. Like Byron Murphy will play the deep half. He'll drop into zones. He'll blitz. And I thought that was just an interesting conversation of like, as they, I use the word recruit potential free agents if Byron Murphy Jr. Is not back, and I think it's still very realistic that he is back. But if they're recruiting potential guys, one of the harder sells is like you've got to do all these different things, and it also complicates the evaluation from Minnesota's perspective. But I thought that was interesting of like Murphy is willing to do all of the wacky stuff that some guys who are just want to press and use their length and play man maybe wouldn't be as willing to do. I just found that interesting.
Yeah, and I think it also points to experience too, right? It's going to be even harder to get a young guy to step in and be able to do all those different things.
Yeah.
And kind of what you're referring to is Flores and their ability to line up in something that looks like something that you do 80% of the time. Then all of a sudden, like you said, Murphy might look like he's a clouded corner, but then all of a sudden he's dropping it in the deep half and you're rotating the other way, things like that. I would think for a cornerback, that would be fun, right? You have to be smarter. You have to learn. There's a lot more knowledge to the game instead of just lining up and saying, I got this cat all day long and I'll just, chase him wherever he goes. So I think that's what having someone like that does point to a veteran to help out more so. But yeah, and the other thing I think too is, we count on our corners to be physical too. Like they have to tackle.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something with DJ Reed. He's smaller. But I think if you had a guy that you could protect him and find ways to keep, from a scheme standpoint, I think you can help with that and cover up. You can't cover up two of them, right? If you have Mekhi Blackman on one side and DJ Reed on the other, it would be, I think it's a lot tougher to do. But if you had one guy, you could protect them. But I think that's another thing where Murphy really kind of fits what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I'll segue to Sam Darnold, and I could ask a host of questions. But coming out of Indy, what was the most interesting aspect of the Sam Darnold conversation to you?
Just how many teams were interested in him. I thought the interest level in Darnold was high, was very high. I was surprised, but then again, there was the quarterback talk is always up there. So no matter who you are or where you're from, but yeah, I think the interest level in Darnold. And again, it just takes two teams. You know, I always look at the Giants, and the only downside with Darnold going to somewhere like the Giants is that he's already been in New York,
Right.
Different team a long time ago. But that team needs to win now, right? The head coach and the general manager can't go 1-5.
They're done
in the beginning of the season, right? They're not going to see Game 7, so they need to be a viable team quickly. The Raiders. Yeah, I think with Raiders, you look at Pete Carroll and say, okay, well, how long is he just trying to get that ship built and then retire? Because if his time frame is shorter, the shorter his time frame is with his age and everything, the more likely they are to go to someone like Darnold. So Tennessee, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see which way Tennessee goes and what they think of their current quarterback, because obviously they may draft a rookie and we'll see. That's going to be kind of the cool part, is what Cleveland does. Are they going to be able to pivot if Tennessee takes Ward and blah blah blah? But so after the draft, there may even be some teams that really need a quarterback. But yeah, the interest level in Darnold was up there. A lot of people curious about what happened to him at the end of the season. I think if he would have finished the season with a playoff win, or at least beating Detroit, the interest level it'd almost be a no-brainer to tag him, right? So I think that's put some question marks in people's minds as to what really happened. I'm curious to your conversation with the quarterback coach to get his take on what happened. Mine is he, by the end of the season, he was sacked nearly 60 times, and he just hit, and it takes its toll. So that's my 2 cents. But
no, I think that's great of you. I mean, the Detroit game was the one that I think stands in people's mind of like, what happened? I mean, that's the one. Because I mean, the Rams game, and yeah, I mean, did he miss throw? Should he have gotten rid of the ball? But I think from a pass protection,
the Rams game was a team. Yeah, the Rams game was a team loss.
Pass protection.
It was like you could list like 10 different, 5 different areas where you're like, well, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Whereas in the Detroit game, you saw the wide open Justin Jefferson in the end zone, and you saw the opportunities, and Orlovsky's pulling out the tape saying, hey, you had this, this, and this. And it was much easier to hyper focus on, on what you need, what went wrong. So yeah, I mean, no question, the Detroit game was the tough one.
The Raiders, to me, I mean, they're maybe the most interesting, because I'm just curious, if you're a first-year general manager in John Spytek, and you've waited years to get this opportunity, and now you get this opportunity, is the first quarterback you want to hitch your tenure on Sam Darnold?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's, to me, it's a very interesting question.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the level of quarterback evaluation you have, or the confidence you have in those guys that are around you.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm a first-year GM and Kevin O'Connell says, yeah, this is the best quarterback of the bunch, I'm like, sure, fine.
Right. Yeah, I trust you.
When you have, you have and it's a tough position to figure out. And so I agree with you on that level. A known commodity, when you trot Darnold out opening day, it's not his first time out there. His first, he's been in a playoff game. So there's a lot less in the way of question marks. And if you have a lot of holes, then you can say, all right, we got this most important position in sports figured out, and now we can concentrate on everything else around it. So it does make a lot of sense in that regard. Instead of bringing in a new, you have a rookie quarterback, you're like, holy cow, here we go. It starts with him, and is that an environment and a division where a rookie quarterback is going to blossom? I don't know.
Right. It might be when you have Sean Payton calling plays, and I know people listening to this have their opinions on Sean Payton and what have you. But I think the way you laid that out is actually very educational for me. It's like, even if there is this uncertainty about how Sam Darnold finished the end of the season, that uncertainty is minimal compared to potential drafting a guy and projecting a guy who's never been in the battles and gone through five seasons of toughness, of ups and downs and all that. So I think that's a very good thing to mention. If we are sitting here, let's just say, I mean, we're recording this Monday, so 10 days from now, free agency's passed and Sam Darnold signed, let's just say, with the Raiders, and the Vikings, it's J.J. McCarthy and Daniel Jones. How will you feel about that?
I'm good with that.
That's simple. Simple.
I'm saying history. Yeah, I mean, history is an you can look at we've done it before. There's no projecting in saying, well, one of these two guys is going to be our guy, and one of these two guys is going to be pretty good. I think it's going to be and there's the learning curve, and with JJ, it's not his first season. Getting one under his belt is going to help him. I think I'd feel fine with either one of them. And if you have both of them, then the good part is you have plenty of cash in free agency.
Yeah.
Right. You're not spending a ton of dough. You have basically two quarterbacks that arguably could work out and be good. Because they did it with Darnold. You can do it with Daniel Jones too. We hope. And Daniel Jones, who looks even better on the hoof. I mean, holy cow. I mean, just such a big body. I mean, he looks. You can see why he was drafted so highly.
I still haven't watched enough film of him, to be honest. Like when they acquired him, I kind of had this idea of like, I'm gonna write a story about some people.
Just watch the playoff game against us 2 years ago.
But I saw I don't want to watch that defense ever again, Pete. Sorry, but I'm not sure if I did.
You're not watching the defense. You're watching the other. You know what I'm saying?
No, that's fair. That's very fair. But you got to understand my perspective.
That run. No, I get it. It's painful. It's very painful. So I would feel you'd feel really good because you have a lot of potential, but you got to realize potential, but you're not, from the cap standpoint, right? You're not extending somebody and giving them ludicrous amounts of money. You got to build, and that makes Kevin O'Connell's got his work cut out for him. He can't go into the season saying, all right, we got, so-and-so back. We got a veteran, we got Kirk Cousins back. So we have, day one, it's not going to be, it'll be a different feel. So he still has a lot of work to do. It's going to be a long year for him in the quarterback room, developing either both or one of the two. So, but if you get, that's why it's like you get a good running back. If we can find a good running back duo, every bit of that takes pressure off whoever's taking snaps.
So you really feel strongly about the running back. I can kind of hear that in the way you're talking about.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. Because if you come out of this without a running back who is Aaron Jones or better, and you can make Aaron Jones even better, I believe, by having a guy that could take 30 or 40% of the snaps off him, so you can get that level of productivity when he's on the field for the next couple of years. The more you have of that back there, number one, the better your offensive line is going to look. And then number two, the more pressure you're taking off your quarterback, right? When you don't have a running game, it all falls on the hand. So it just, to me, makes sense that they find a couple of guys at that position, right? Even, so don't call it crazy, but even if you pick a running back in the first round, right? You have, even if you have Aaron Jones and then go ahead and pick it, so you have a good running back duo that will help. That's why I always look back and say Christian Ponder set this team back a ton, because you could not have had a better time to have a young quarterback developing. You had Adrian Peterson, who everybody's looking at him, not you. They're all worried about the guy standing behind you, and you had a defense that was very, very good. And we missed that window. So I look at it kind of the same way. The better the running back room, the easier it's going to make life on the guy taking snaps. So that's I think a linchpin in this whole thing.
Well,
Um,
it's very interesting to hear you say that because I was having a conversation with a buddy the other day about Aaron Jones, and he was like, "Yeah, I know he played every game and he had 1,500 yards from scrimmage, but I mean, the reality is the free agent market at running back, besides Aaron Jones, is not phenomenal. It just really is not. It's like Najee Harris and J.K.
right.
Dobbins and Javonte Williams and some guys. And so that's why when people ask, why would the Vikings be interested to re-sign Aaron Jones? It's that. And I think your point is accurate in that if you can add another guy alongside him who is
You have to.
is dynamic and can shoulder some of the load, it only exponentially affects him. And then I don't think enough
Yeah.
about if you have a better running back and that helps the offensive line, then that can help the quarterback and it helps the O-line and pass protection. It's all intertwined.
Yeah, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts if you can get another running back. And the other thing too is guard is important. You have, you can't just I mean clean out the interior, all three of them. Blake Brandel started the season off very well, and I was impressed he actually kind of surprised me. But if you have a big guard next to you can get by with a Bradbury with a big guard, right? Because Bradbury can use his athleticism, and so I think that's how you need to look at the right guard position. You're going to need somebody who's big and physical, and if you do that, then I think Bradbury's going to be better, right? His play, that's the kind of guy he needs. If you put him next to an undersized guard, now it's going to be tough. But if you put and bring in a big earth moving type of a guard, road grader type, and then you let Bradbury do his thing and be an athlete, that's going to work. That's going to work out well with the zone and the reach blocks and all that. So that's I think the style of guard you want to bring in, and so you can replace and figure out that one side, and then. So you have one guard that you bring in, and then one or two running backs. Our offenses should be as good, if not better, than it was a year ago.
Yeah, you have a healthy Hockenson. Christian Darrisaw is back, which I mean that even has an exponential effect. It allows Hockenson to get out on the route. It means more help for the left guard. I mean,
that'll help Brandel out a lot too. And so, I mean, so my point is that the offense is a little bit easier to figure out in that regard. It's not as much of a mystery, so to speak. And then, then defensively, I mean, you lose Murphy. What's that room look like right now?
I think that's the question. Right. That's why when I write and when the people listen to this hear that the team is as interested in re-signing Byron Murphy as it is, I mean, that's a lot of having to face that question you just presented is why.
And, and keep this in mind. And it's like, I look at this defense and go, man, if we had a stud defensive tackle, you mentioned it in your article that Bullard and Phillips had 222 snaps together. And we ranked, real low in the pressure category. It's one we went with the 5-man rush that we didn't get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. So having somebody that could transition into a pass rush would help. But don't forget, we were top half in most stats. Mainly if you want to look at yardage, you look at yards per snap. We were a top 10 defense.
They did a hell of a job. They did
with Bullard, Phillips, and Tillery, right? I mean. So you can still be a good defense without, without a Dexter Lawrence in the middle. Would it help if you had him? 100%. But you've got a cornerback room that could be empty, right? So your priorities are like, okay, I'd love to have somebody in here, and you usually have to, top 3 rounds to bring in a stud defensive tackle. But again, another point is there's 1,000 defensive snaps a year, 1,200 somewhere in there,
yeah.
And so 1 out of every 5 featured those. So even if you bring in a big guy, how often is he going to be out there? Guarantee you though, if he can rush the passer, it'll be more often than not. It's a position that is icing on the cake. If this defense, if you get that guy in the middle, you could take this defense to a whole nother level. It's going to help the linebackers
Exactly.
out.
That effect.
A ton. You have the two outside linebackers you have play the run extremely well. Right. I think that's kind of maybe an underrated part of Grenard's game. Van Ginkel. Just they're unbelievable at playing the run. And you get a big body in the middle too, then that's just going to take the physicality off the linebacker position, which I think got run down maybe a little bit toward the end of the year.
And that's the point. If you have a guy on the interior, I mean, it's felt like they got worn down. I think the defense as a whole, and some of that might have been it, but I think that's also
some of them.
You're guarding against some of that as well.
And then the other thing you could just say, screw it, let's just get the D line stacked up, and that'll make the DBs better. We can go back and just throw. You and I could play cornerback at the quarterback as 2 seconds to throw. Right, as 2 seconds to throw the football. I mean, there's with the way they were able to find value in free agency last year, it gives you a ton of hope as far as what the amount and who they could bring in. And then take some of the mystery out of what this team needs in the draft, but don't undervalue the running back position with this offense. I think that, again, that's kind of like, if we go into the season, even with a maybe a new guard and some other things up front, but we don't have that running back position, I think that one's key.
I can hear your stress in your voice as you're talking.
I mean, the Madison, you look at the Alexander Madison year. He didn't take any pressure at all off the quarterback position. He did, there wasn't, and we needed it because Cousins got hurt, but he just didn't. And so you got to have that guy. You need that guy for that balance, so you can be. You don't have to be number one in the league in run and pass, but you need to be in the top 10-ish in both categories.
To me, it's just like, does the defense fear, if you do this, do they feel like they have to defend it and it is a priority for them to defend it? Like that, do they feel that way? And I don't feel like, since I started covering the team in 2022, the defense that the Vikings has faced has ever been like, man, if they run the ball here, it's going to be tough for us. I just have never felt that in that regard. And that may be harsh of me to say, but that's just how it feels to me.
Yeah. I think our scheme, don't forget with Flores and when he first came here, the scheme is about stopping the run. Right. And they do, we do a really Incredible. Good job of it. And I do think that with the way our outside linebackers can play, teams are going to have a hard time getting outside on us. Atlanta, I remember in Atlanta did a really nice job running the ball up in the middle on us. And that was, some of the guys in the middle, I think, wearing out a little bit, not having a lot of depth at that position. So, but you need, I'm trying to remember his name. Jalen Redmonds. You need the Jalen Redmonds of the world, guys you can get 15 snaps out of a game, right? Yeah. And we need depth. I mean, you were going into games with 4 interior defensive linemen, right?
Yeah,
we could use more. Yeah. We could, and you could use more big bodies in games. Like I remember Philadelphia a couple years ago, and you got outside linebackers playing interior defensive line.
Patrick Jones slid in,
right? Patrick Jones, and then you look at the Detroit game at home. One of the rushing touchdowns, we had our third down defense out there, and they just handed the ball off, and right up, and so yeah, you need a bigger guy that's got some juice in the pass rush. That would help. It would help. Is it on the scale of 1 to 10? Is it up? I think running back and cornerback right now are big.
I think that's a very good perspective. Well, question-wise, that's all I had. It should be.
Well, that's why you pay me. That's why you pay me all this money.
Yeah, exactly. To come on, exactly. Yeah, it's. Well, it's a
right.
Look, we'll get the
Right.
sponsor. Come on, this is an early operation here, Pete.
No, I mean, and I mean, I'm not your producer. Don't get. I mean, I'm not saying I am, but it's going to be very interesting to see as these dominoes fall. You know, just revisiting this conversation we just had. Once these dominoes start to fall, we sign Byron Murphy back. Okay, awesome. Boom. What does that mean? Right. And, you sign back Aaron Jones. I'm like, great. That's awesome. Draft another one.
Yeah. And they
draft another running back. Can we find an offensive line, an offensive guard? I don't know. I know we have a new coach, a new assistant offensive line coach that we're bringing in. I want to do some research on him, just because getting a fresh set of eyes for the run game and those sort of things. Could that make a difference? Where, his past, where he is and who he's developed. That's what whenever you bring coaches in, you always look at the team where they came from and, hey, did they have a 7th rounder or a 6th rounder or 5th round, somebody that they developed. Cause that's important. You kind of, it's hard to have first linemen across the front on offense. It's very, very difficult.
No question.
So, and we got plenty of them. We got a lot of them.
Indeed. Well, yeah.
I'm just saying we did for a while, but between O'Neal, Bradbury
Darisaw.
and Darisaw, it's a lot of draft equity.
It is. There's no doubt. We will revisit this, anyway. No question. And for all that I pay you at some point, we'll have you back on. But thanks for hopping on. The 4.840. That's pretty impressive. I don't know what I would have guessed.
Yeah, not really. No.
In those days,
how much? I was 240 something.
That's not bad. I don't think
it was respectable.
Yeah.
It was all right.
Okay.
I did. Here's the thing. And this is Monty Kiffin told me that's why I got drafted, because on the short, I had my short shuttle time was right at 4 seconds, if not below.
Wow.
So I was quicker than I was fast.
Look, that's all it took. It worked out. Thanks for hopping on. As always, it's always fun. We'll revisit it, but I appreciate it. It was great to see you in Indy, if so brief.
It was fun
while Mr. Allen was speaking as per usual, but always good. Thanks, Pete. All right, that'll do it for the Alec Lewis Show. I appreciate you guys being here for episode 63. Always fun to chat with Pete, whose playing days perspective I just value. And I've said this before in the podcast, but I think I always have to be mindful of the fact that I didn't do this. I didn't play. I didn't coach. I wasn't in the league. So anytime I can garner the perspective of people who have done it and have a relationship with the history of this organization, I think I'm doing myself a service, as I want to feel as informed as I can. And then you guys as well. I mean, Pete's a guy who is informative. He has a good perspective. He has the background. And so that's always the goal of the show. Bring as much information that is not too serious, but provides a pretty intelligent, hopefully, perspective for you guys. That is the goal. Like I said at the top, have a couple more shows this week that I'm looking forward to. Won't be as long as this one, but, thank you guys for being here. If you made it all the way through, stay locked into The Athletic. We have a lot more this week. Editors want another mock draft, so we're going to hit that later in the week and might get a little creative with that one after some stuff I've heard. So, thank you. This is episode 63 of The Alec Lewis Show. Hope you guys have a phenomenal early part of your week.